It was a chilly November evening when Ryan found himself sitting at the corner table in a bustling coffee shop. The warm light flickered from the ceiling and the rich smell of coffee filled the air. He was alone, tapping his fingers nervously on the wooden surface, his mind racing with thoughts. His eyes kept drifting toward the door, waiting for her Emma. Emma walked in, her cheeks flushed from the cold. She spotted Ryan and smiled, her eyes sparkling as if the world outside didn't exist. But as she approached the table, Ryan noticed something peculiar. Her hands were trembling slightly. He wondered what stirred this feeling in her, but he pushed it aside. Tonight was supposed to be special. Emma said, her voice bright despite the slight shake in her hands. She slid into the seat opposite Ryan. Sorry I'm late. Ryan nodded, trying to mask his concern with a smile. No problem. They exchanged small talk about their day, the usual chatter about work, friends, and plans for the weekend. But beneath the light conversation, Ryan could sense something deeper. Emma seemed distant, like her mind was wandering somewhere else. Every so often, he caught her glancing down at her bag as if she was weighing some heavy thought. Emma hesitated, biting her lip. Ryan wanted to press further. He wanted to dig deeper and find out what was troubling her, but he didn't want to push. Instead, he just reached across the table and took her hand. It was warm, but he could still feel the slight tremble in her fingers. Emma shook her head, though her eyes were filled with unshed tears. Not quite yet, she opened her bag and pulled out a small green wallet. As she opened it, her hands started to shake more intensely, as if by some unseen force. Ryan's heart raced. Why was she shaking? What was in that wallet? Curiosity mixed with concern swirled inside him, tightening like a vice around his chest. Emma looked up and caught his gaze. Her voice was almost a whisper now, and Ryan leaned in closer, eager to hear her words. Ryan smiled, still holding her hand. You don't have to do anything for me. She took a deep breath, and for a moment Ryan thought she might burst into tears. It's hard for me to explain, but I wanted to get you something. With shaky fingers, she pulled out a small card from her wallet. It was an envelope decorated with colorful patterns. Ryan frowned slightly, unsure of what was happening. Open it, she urged, her breath catching in her throat. Ryan took the envelope, feeling the weight of it. Slowly, he pulled out a gift card. It was for an expensive restaurant one he had mentioned wanting to try. Confusion washed over him. Emma, this is... No. Her eyes widened and Ryan focused on her face. I know things have been tough for me lately and I've been saving up for this. She paused, her voice cracking. Ryan's mind raced. They had fought recently, a heated argument where harsh words were thrown back and forth. He thought it was over, but looking into her eyes now, he realized how much love still lingered under the surface. I know. Her hands shook as she spoke, her jaw set in a determination usually unseen. Are you okay? He began, concern etched across his face. I'm fine. She forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. For a moment, silence fell around them, heavy and thick. Ryan could see the fear beneath her bravado, the invisible weight she carried. Emma, I want that too, he said softly, his voice full of warmth. As if sensing a shift, she took a deep breath and her hands began to steady. Really? Of course. Emma's shoulders relaxed a little and a hint of relief flitted across her face, but Ryan still sensed that there was something deeper troubling her. Why was she shaking? Was it just anxiety or was there something else? Then she began to speak slowly. The fight, it made me realize how much I really need you in my life. Ryan felt warmth spread through him at her words, but a part of him still remained unsure. I need you to be completely honest with me. Emma's eyes fell to the table, her fingers picking at the edge of her napkin. It's just that, I don't want to lose you. Of everything, my job, my future, us. I know I haven't been the best partner lately and it's all caught up with me. When I see your wallet on the table, it reminds me of all the times I haven't been there for you. I felt like I was letting you down and it terrified me. Ryan's heart ached for her. He saw the swirling storm of emotions in her eyes, fear, regret, love. Emma, he said carefully, we all go through tough times. The tremble in her hands slowly faded as his words settled in. It just felt like, if I could give you this, it could somehow make things better. You don't need to prove anything, we all stumble sometime. What matters is that we pick each other back up, Ryan said, squeezing her hand gently. Emma breathed deeply, and for the first time all night, a genuine smile unfurled on her lips. I really want to try, Ryan, I want to meet you where you are. And just like that, the atmosphere in the coffee shop changed. The tension began to dissolve, replaced by a renewed sense of hope. As they spoke, the words flowed easier, and their smiles grew wider. With every shared laugh, every gentle word, Ryan could feel the barriers between them lifting. As the evening wore on, they lost track of time, immersed in each other's stories, dreams, and fears. The coffee shop buzzed around them, but it felt as if they were in their own little world. But as the night wrapped up, as the server prepared to clean up the remaining tables, Ryan couldn't shake the concern that had once tightened his chest. The wallet. The tremors had stayed tucked in the back of his mind, waiting for its moment to rise again. She looked directly into his eyes, her own reflecting curiosity and perhaps a hint of apprehension. Promise me you won't keep everything inside anymore. If you're scared or upset, just talk to me. Her brow furrowed as she considered his words. I promise, I know, but it's important. He held her gaze, determination brimming in his voice. With a nod, Emma echoed his promise. Okay. The shaking had completely stopped now, replaced by a fragile but growing sense of togetherness. They left the coffee shop side by side, hand in hand, ready to face whatever was next. But something lingered in the air as they walked out into the night, an unspoken agreement that their journey was far from over, and perhaps the real conversations were only just beginning. The moment Jake opened his wallet, Sarah's hands began to shake. It was subtle at first, a slight tremor that went unnoticed by most in the crowded diner, but Jake felt it like a crack in the atmosphere. Clinking of silverware and low hum of chatter faded into the background as her eyes widened, reflecting a mix of fear and uncertainty. There they were, seated in a booth at their usual spot. The neon light flickered overhead, casting a soft glow on their faces, yet the warmth of familiarity felt foreign in that moment. Jake took a deep breath, his heart pounding louder than the background noise. He wasn't expecting this reaction. He wasn't even aware of how significant this moment would become. He asked, concern lacing his voice as he pulled out the small cash he'd set aside for their lunch. She looked away, focusing on the ketchup bottle planted in the center of the table, as if it held answers to questions neither of them had the courage to ask. "I'm fine," she replied, but there was an edge to her voice, a tremor that betrayed her. Jake's instincts kicked in. He had known Sarah long enough to recognize when she was not being truthful. "You don't look fine." She hesitated, biting her lip. The hesitation stretched out like an elastic band, taunting him with unfinished thoughts. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't want you to think I'm—" Jake furrowed his brow, inadequate. As he flipped through the bills, trying to ignore the growing tension, he realized none of his gestures seemed to ease her mind. Her hands convulsed slightly as she pushed her fingers through her hair. "I just feel terrible sometimes." Another pause, laden with unsaid words. A lump formed in Jake's throat. He was acutely aware of the weight of his wallet in that moment. The money could buy their lunch, sure, but what it really represented was far more complex. It spoke of their dreams, their struggles, and everything they were trying to build together. "What does this have to do with my wallet, Sarah? It's not just lunch to me," she confessed, her voice breaking. "I feel like a burden, I'm not contributing enough, and every time I see you open that wallet, I see all the sacrifices you're making for us. I can't help but feel—" "Stop," Jake interrupted gently but firmly, his heart aching at her vulnerability. "You are not a burden. You're my partner, my equal," she said, her eyes pleading. The diner felt like a world amplified, the sounds of laughter and clinks of plates drowning out everything personal. Jake set his wallet down, the soft sound echoing between them. "We can work through this." Sarah's hands shook more now, and Jake noticed the sheen of tears pooling in her eyes. "You don't understand. It goes beyond just money. It's about being seen as valuable." Her words pierced through him, shattering any illusions of easy solutions. In that moment, he realized how deeply the societal pressure to be a provider had affected both of them. Jake understood what it was like, the expectations weighing heavy on their shoulders, a reminder that security often rests in the hands that carry the most responsibility. "You're valuable to me in ways that money can't measure," he said, softening his tone. "You keep my world balanced, you bring joy and laughter. You support me in a million little ways that I can't even begin to repay. You're not a burden, you're a blessing." Sarah met his gaze, and in the depths of her eyes, Jake could see a flicker of hope battling against the shadows of self-doubt. The trembling in her hands began to ease ever so slightly as she took a deep breath. "I know you are," he replied, reaching across the table to grasp her hand, "and we're going to figure this out one step at a time." As they sat in the diner, hands entwined, Jake realized this conversation was only a layer of the larger story that had been brewing beneath the surface. He thought back to the moments that had led them here, nights spent crunching numbers, talks about future plans, their hopes and fears intermingling in endless discussions. One particular moment crept into his mind as if it were just yesterday. They had sat on the couch, surrounded by bills, stress lines etching their faces. Jake could still see Sarah's furrowed brow as she tried to balance her part-time job with her dreams. "I just want to do something meaningful," she had said, and in that instant he felt her frustration echo in his own chest. Now, as they sat across from each other, he knew they needed to delve deeper than finances. The real question was how they could support one another in their respective journeys. "What do you want, Sarah? Not in terms of finances, but in life." She paused, searching his eyes for something: assurance, understanding, maybe even hope. "I want to open my own bakery," she said finally, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and desire. Jake exclaimed, his tone shifting from concern to excitement. "I didn't want you to think I was dreaming too big," she admitted, her voice small. "The fear of failure is the first ingredient in every success story," he said, squeezing her hand tighter. As if on cue, the waitress appeared with their orders, the smell of greasy burgers and golden fries wafting over the table. Jake remained focused on Sarah. "We can carve out time for you, we can budget. If you need to take cooking classes or save for supplies, I'll help you." Sarah's eyes glistened, and the trembling in her hands finally began to fade. "Absolutely," he declared, leaning even closer to her. "You have talent, and more importantly, you have the heart for it, and I see that." The air in the diner felt lighter now, the weight of the conversation transforming from heavy to hopeful. Sarah's laughter danced through the air, infectious and pure, the steady rhythm of life returning to their shared space. "I guess it's true," she said, smiling through tears. As they finished their meal, Jake reached for the bill, his heart full. The shaking of Sarah's hands had long since faded, replaced by a newfound confidence wrapped in their shared dreams. He could feel the heartbeat of their relationship reorganizing itself, turning love into the kind of partnership built on trust, understanding, and shared aspirations. In that moment, Jake realized that how they navigated the trials ahead mattered far more than the funds in his wallet or the number on her paycheck. It was about creating space for each other's dreams, lifting one another in their moments of doubt, and building a life that encapsulated the beauty of their combined stories. As they stepped outside into the cool evening air, Jake put his arm around Sarah, feeling the warmth radiating from her. The world outside bustled with life. Cars zoomed past and the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of pink and gold. "Let's get started on planning that bakery," he said playfully, and she laughed, the sound ringing like music in the twilight. She shot back, mischief sparkling in her eyes. Jake grinned, excitement igniting in his heart. "Deal." They strolled down the sidewalk hand in hand, the weight of expectation lifted and the horizon full of possibilities. Tonight was not just a turning point, it was a promise, a commitment not just to each other, but to a life filled with passion, dreams, and unwavering support. As they walked into the night, the trembling hands of doubts had transformed into hands shaping a new destiny, side by side. The quiet of the small cafe was pierced by a sudden silence as Derek opened his wallet. For a split second, time seemed to freeze. The usual sounds of clinking cups and soft chatter faded into the background, and all eyes turned to Leela. Her hands began to shake, betraying her calm facade as she stared at the opened wallet, its contents laid bare. Derek glanced up, confusion flickering across his face. He had just been joking about ordering dessert, feeling carefree in the moment, but now, looking at Leela, he felt a pang of worry. The way her fingers trembled made his heart race. The cafe's warm ambience suddenly felt heavy. She cleared her throat, trying to mask her discomfort. "Yeah, I'm fine," she lied, but the lie hung in the air like a fragile balloon ready to pop. The waitress strolled by, approaching with a friendly smile. Derek turned his attention to the menu, but his mind was still focused on Leela. Just a couple of chocolate chip cookies for the table," he said absent-mindedly, still watching her expression. He could see the shadows of anxiety forming around her eyes, and he wished he knew how to reach out to make it better. Derek urged, leaning closer. She took a deep breath, a war raging behind her eyes. "It's just," she looked down, her voice dropping to a whisper. The weight of her words hung heavily between them, and Derek felt a flicker of discomfort ignite within him. It wasn't just the money, he could feel the societal pressure clawing at them both. "I don't want to be a burden," she confessed, her voice trembling, matching the slight shake of her hands. It was as if the act of opening his wallet had unlocked a door filled with insecurities. Derek's heart sank. "You could never be a burden, Leila. But it's different now," she said, her eyes reflecting something deeper. "With both of us trying to make ends meet, I worry." Derek felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. The truth was, he shared her worries. As a freelance graphic designer, his income ebbed and flowed unpredictably. He had come to terms with the reality, but seeing Leila struggle with these feelings broke him in a way he hadn't anticipated. He reached across the table, gently placing his hand over hers, trying to anchor her in the moment. "We're a team, remember." But Leila's eyes glimmered with unspoken fears. "What if I can't hold up my end? What if I can't find a full-time job? What if?" The anxiety crept into the corners of the cafe like an unwelcome guest. Derek observed the other patrons, couples laughing, friends catching up, and it felt surreal. They were sitting in one world while their lives were completely different. He wished he could borrow some of their ease, the casual nature with which they navigated their lives. "Layla," he said slowly, his voice low and steady, "let's be real here. Every relationship has its ups and downs. Sometimes it feels like we're climbing a mountain." She nodded, but the tremor in her hands didn't ease. It was as if they were trapped in a loop, and this conversation had triggered a cascade of emotions that were hard to control. But what if I can't keep going? All this pressure. The words hit Derek like a punch to the gut. He knew the pressure came from so many directions. Society expected both partners to contribute equally, and amid student loans, rent, and living expenses, it often felt like they were on a balancing beam, teetering with each fluctuating paycheck. He took a glance around the diner again, watching a couple at the next table share a slice of cake, laughter bubbling between them like champagne. "Look around," he urged, gesturing with his free hand. "Those people don't know the battles we're facing. They have their own, and each doesn't matter more than our own struggles." Leila hesitated, digging her nails into the tablecloth, her grip revealing the turmoil within. "Social media has us all convinced that our lives have to look perfect." In that moment, Derek realized this was more than a financial discussion. This was about the inherent struggles related to self-worth and identity. They had both been swept up by the illusions created around them, each silently battling insecurities that had been amplified by the culture of comparison. The waitress returned with their cookies, placing them on the table, perfectly golden brown, steam rising from them. Derek offered a weak smile, diverting his attention momentarily. "Look, these are worth it." He tried to lighten the mood, reaching for a cookie. "Let's focus on the things that bring us joy." But Leela didn't move for the cookies. Instead, her focus lay somewhere else. "I think it's sweet you want to lighten the mood, but we can't ignore how I feel. This isn't just about wanting dessert." Her words hit him hard. He asked, desperation creeping into his tone. "Tell me I'm here, but I can't fix everything." "I want to feel secure," she said, her voice trembling. "I want to feel valued not just by you, but by myself. I want to contribute to make a difference." Derek felt a shiver run down his spine. This was deeper than just finances. It was about their relationship, about trust and communication. If we both think of it that way, then we'll always be at odds. Leela finally lifted her gaze, her eyes meeting his with a fierce intensity. "Have you ever thought about talking to someone?" he suggested hesitantly. Leela flinched slightly, a wave of discomfort washing over her. "You mean therapy?" "No, not at all. I just think it could help," he countered quickly, sensing her defensiveness. "We all get bogged down by life." The room was thick with tension, the air almost electric as the conversation swirled around them. Leela stared down at the table. "I don't know, Derek, I just don't want to be the reason." "Layla, you're not dragging me down, you're my partner." "If you're struggling, then I'm struggling with you. That's how this works," Derek said firmly, hoping to cut through the fog of doubt. She was silent for a moment, the tremble in her hands settling just a little, but Derek could still feel the gravity of her thoughts. "You're right," she finally said, her voice softer, more resolved. "I need to stop comparing myself to what everyone else has." Derek smiled, his heart lightening. "That's a start, right? From now on, let's promise to check in with each other. No more hiding. If something's bothering you, I want to know." She nodded slowly, her expression calming, the shadows starting to lift. "I can try that." Derek looked around and spotted a family in the corner, a small child giggling at a joke while reaching for her cookie. There was a lightness in that moment, the innocence of childhood reminding him that some things should be simpler. "Maybe we can set aside a date night," he proposed playfully. "You bake those cookies you love, and we just enjoy each other's company, talk about our day. No pressure, no worries." A smile crept onto Leela's lips. "That sounds really nice," she replied, a lightness finally breaking through her tension. As they shared their cookies and their laughter mingled with the busy ambience of the cafe, Derek realized that this was only the beginning of their journey together. They had to navigate the turbulent waters of life, confronting their fears together, assuring each other that they were far stronger united. The trembling in Leela's hands had evolved throughout their conversation, morphing from fear into a steadfast resolve, as if she was shedding a skin that no longer served her. In opening up to him, she had began to dismantle the barriers that had formed, layer by layer, moment by moment. They left the cafe hand in hand, the crisp evening air wrapping around them as a sense of newfound connection forged ahead. The world buzzed on around them, and as they walked toward their home, the future seemed a little less daunting. With each step, they were crafting a narrative together, one filled with dreams, struggles, hopes, and love. They were on a path that promised to be as rich and complex as the tide of life itself, a tide they would face together. The moment Alex opened his wallet, Sarah's hands started to shake. It was a small diner on the corner of Maple Street, a place they frequented after long work days. The air inside was thick with the smell of fries and coffee, but the warmth of the environment couldn't soften the chill in her spine. She watched him pull out a couple of crumpled bills, and suddenly, the diner felt like a spotlight focusing solely on them. "Hey, I'll grab the check this time," Alex said with a casual smile, unaware of the turmoil swirling inside her. Sarah's heartbeat quickened, an almost deafening roar in her ears. She forced a smile, but it felt tight, like the walls closing in. The wallet, its contents spilling out into the open air, became a symbol of everything she feared. It was more than just money. It was her self-worth, her sense of stability, and the expectations she placed on herself all rolled into one. He asked, glancing up at her, his brow furrowing with concern. "Yeah, just tired," she lied, her eyes darting to her own empty plate, the remnants of their meal lying cold and uneaten, but inside an internal struggle raged. Sarah had always prided herself on her independence. Having moved out at 18, she had built a life for herself through hard work. Yet lately, she felt the weight of the world pressing down harder than ever, and her insecurities bubbled to the surface without her consent. Alex slid the check across the table, that grin still plastered on his face. But the moment hung in the air like a movie scene gone wrong, the tension palpable. The truth was, his financial stability was a source of unease for her. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was holding him back, and that thought twisted her insides into knots. His voice broke through her thoughts, pulling her back into the moment. She responded, still finding it hard to focus on his words. Do you have cash for the tip? I sorta forgot to bring any," he chuckled, attempting to keep the mood light. That's when her hands began to shake, a mixture of anxiety and dread flooding her system. Their relationship had grown over shared dreams and late-night talks, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was not pulling her weight. She thought of her stagnant job, the paycheck that barely covered her bills, and the ambitions she had shelved away in her mind for too long. To see him taking care of the finances, even in small ways, felt like a constant reminder of what she had yet to achieve. Right, she forced herself to reach for her bag, her fingers trembling as they brushed against the contents inside. The motion felt foreign, like pulling a thread that could unravel everything. Just taking a moment, she added with a weak smile. If you need to talk, or no, not now, she interrupted, her voice sharper than she intended. The heat rose to her cheeks, but the pressure was too much. It's just, Alex's expression shifted, confusion furrowing his brow. Of course, I didn't mean to push. She felt a sense of panic rising within her, making it hard to breathe. The diner closed in around her, the chatter of other tables becoming muffled as if she were trapped in a bubble. The shaking in her hands intensified, and she clenched them into fists beneath the table, struggling to ground herself. I want to be better, she finally admitted, her voice dropping to a mere whisper. The vulnerability in her words hung in the air, a fragile tension between them. Alex's gaze softened, and she saw him processing what she had said. Sarah, he began gently, you're more than enough, we're in this together. She blurted out, her voice shaking. It feels like every time you pull out your wallet, it's a reminder that I'm not pulling my weight. A silence fell between them, and in that moment, dozens of thoughts raced through Sarah's mind. Her fears, her doubts, the expectations she felt from society, from herself. A harsh reality began to settle in. She had been focusing too much on what she lacked instead of what she had. Look at us, Alex said slowly, pausing to choose his words carefully. Everyone has their struggles, I have mine too. She burst out, tears welling in her eyes. His expression shifted, betraying hurt and understanding. But needing help doesn't make you weak, Sarah. She drew in a shaky breath and wiped away a tear, embarrassed by her emotions, but Alex held steady, his unwavering gaze meeting hers. Sometimes it's okay to be vulnerable. I just thought I could handle everything on my own, she replied, her voice trembling. He asked softly, you're not a burden, you're my partner. The truth of his words settled over her, like a blanket warming her shivering spirit. She took a moment to breathe, the trembling in her hands starting to calm, and she allowed herself to meet his gaze, letting the warmth of his presence give her strength. Maybe I just need to acknowledge that it's okay to have moments where I feel this way, she admitted quietly. Walls can keep people out, but they can also isolate you, he said. I want you to be open with me, to share your fears. We're stronger together. As she listened to him, Sarah began to feel that the shaking in her hands had been a warning, a signal that it was time to confront her emotions instead of burying them in silence. I'm sorry I didn't tell you how I felt sooner, she whispered. No need to apologize, he replied, reaching across the table again to take her hands into his. The warmth of his touch melted any lingering tension. For a moment, the world around them faded completely. In that diner, amidst the hum of conversations and the clatter of dishes, they had carved out a sanctuary of vulnerability. Maybe I can work on some freelance projects, Sarah suggested, a flicker of hope igniting within her. And I'll support you all the way, Alex said, a soft smile spreading across his face. With each passing second, the weight of her fears began to lift. She felt lighter as she held onto his hands, a mixture of relief and gratitude washing over her. Thank you for being patient with me, she said sincerely. He asked, glimmering excitement in his tone. Make it fun, spending money doesn't have to equal stress. She grinned, feeling a sense of camaraderie replace the anxiety that had plagued her moments before. I like that idea, he lit up, their earlier tensions dissipating like steam from a cup of coffee. Just then, the waitress returned with another plate of cookies and a smile, interrupting their moment. She asked, observing the change in their moods. With a smirk, Alex pointed at the plate. Can you make these to go, please? As they held hands across the table, Sarah felt a profound shift inside her. She no longer needed to carry the weight of her insecurities alone. The wallet, once a source of anxiety, now represented collaboration, teamwork, and dreams unfolding before them. Once their bills were paid and pastries tucked neatly away, they stepped out of the diner into the cool evening air. The streetlights illuminated their path, casting a warm glow over them. Sarah mused, glancing up at him, hope radiating from her heart. Absolutely, Alex replied, squeezing her hand gently. Let's keep this spirit alive. They walked together, the sense of lightness echoing with each step. Their fears were still there, lurking in the shadows, but now they had a foundation built on open communication. Together, they could transform their struggles into stepping stones. A night out at their favorite cafe had become a moment of reckoning, transforming anxiety into unity. They had peeled back the layers of insecurity, revealing the connection between love and vulnerability and how it could create space for growth. As they settled into their routine, they would remember this moment, this turning point. The path ahead was still uncertain, with the possibility of challenges lingering in the distance, but they would no longer face it alone. With shared dreams and a steadfast belief in each other, they moved forward, ready to embrace whatever life threw their way hand in hand. The moment Tom opened his wallet, Mia's hands began to shake. The The chatter of the cafe faded into an almost surreal silence, the aroma of fresh coffee hanging heavy in the air. She felt as if the room had closed in around her, the warm chatter of other customers pressing down on her chest. Tom's brow furrowed as he slid out a few crumpled bills. "I thought we'd celebrate tonight." His smile was bright, but Mia couldn't focus on it. All she could see was the way he handled the cash, casual and confident, while her insides churned with unease. "Dessert sounds great," she managed to say, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack at any moment. But as he placed the money on the table, her heart raced. This wasn't just about dessert, it was about the weight behind those bills and everything they represented. Tom asked, concern washing over his features. "You seem a little off." Mia swallowed hard, trying to steady her voice. "I'm fine," she lied, but the tremor in her hands gave her away. She looked down at her fingers, clenched tightly together, and felt the urge to pull away from the table completely. The fight or flight instinct had kicked in, and she felt trapped. The words spilled out before she could catch them, laced with frustration and anxiety. Each syllable echoed in her mind, amplifying the tension that had settled in her stomach. Tom's voice was a mix of confusion and hurt. He leaned forward, trying to understand. The clanging of dishes and low conversations swirled around them, yet it felt like they had stepped into another world. She blurted, it's complicated, can we just?" Her heart raced, and she recoiled at the thought of what she might reveal if she kept talking. She didn't want him to see how afraid she was, afraid of the future, afraid of her own weaknesses, and most of all, afraid of failing in their relationship. Tom began, but Mia cut him off, shaking her head. She exclaimed, her voice tightening, "It's about everything." He pressed, though his tone was softer now, less defensive. "Supporting me, I can't keep feeling like I'm taking more than I give." The words tumbled out in a rush. She could feel tears stinging her eyes, frustration boiling beneath the surface. Tom sighed, his face softening as he pulled his wallet back into his pocket. "Mia, you are contributing." The tremor in her hands intensified as the emotional weight bore down on her. Even this moment, sitting in a cozy cafe surrounded by laughter and warmth, felt isolating. "It doesn't feel that way," she whispered, so quietly that it almost got lost in the noise. Tom shifted in his seat, leaning closer as if he could bridge the chasm between them simply by your body language. "What can I do to help?" As she looked into his eyes, the depth of her feelings washed over her like a tidal wave. It wasn't about what he could do, it was about how she felt. Deep down, she was grappling with her own inadequacies, and the image of him pulling money from his wallet had become a symbol of everything that terrified her. "I just don't want to hold you back," she confessed, barely above a whisper. "You could never hold me back," he said firmly, "but you've got to let me in. You're not a burden, you're my partner." She felt the surge of disbelief wash over her. "Look at us, Mia," he said gently. "Everyone has their battles. I'm just asking you to share yours with me." His sincerity struck her hard, and the walls she had built around her emotions began to crumble. She felt the weight of shame, relief, and vulnerability wash over her all at once. I sometimes feel like I'm not enough," she admitted, her voice cracking. "That voice is a liar," Tom asserted, his expression earnest. "It thrives on fear, and it's only powerful if you let it be." As his words settled over her, the tension in the room began to dissipate. The tremor in her hands began to fade, replaced by a warmth that spread through her chest. "I've always been independent," she said, almost to the air. "Moving out, working 2 jobs, it's how I define myself." "You're not failing, you're growing," he replied with warmth. His words resonated within her. She thought of all the moments they had shared, the late-night talks about dreams, the laughter over shared meals, the comfort in their silences. Those moments began to weave together in her mind like a tapestry where each thread represented their journey. "Okay," she said slowly, looking into his eyes. "I want to try." "Then let's talk about it," Tom suggested. "Let's set aside time each week where we can just check in with each other, no pressure." Mia took a deep breath, feeling courage bubbling beneath the surface. "I'd like that," she admitted, the thought of opening up no longer feeling as daunting. Just then the waitress returned, placing their dessert on the table with a bright smile. "Here you go." Both Mia and Tom looked at the plate of decadent chocolate cake, the rich aroma wafting through the air, and for the first time that evening a laugh escaped Mia's lips. "Maybe that'll cheer us up," she said, reaching for a fork. "Let's share," Tom said, sliding the plate closer to her. As she took a small piece of cake, she felt the sweetness dissolve into warmth, a stark contrast to the fear and insecurity she had been wrestling earlier. "This is amazing," she said, her eyes lighting up. "See, life isn't all bad," Tom replied, an easy smile settling on his lips as he leaned back in his chair, visibly relieved that the tension had loosened. "Yeah," she agreed, savoring the bite. With one more bite, she realized how therapeutic this shared moment felt. They had confronted the tension head-on, and instead of tearing them apart, it had pulled them closer together. "Just remember this," Tom said, his voice serious again. "You're not alone, and you don't have to fight your battles in silence." She nodded, feeling grateful. "I will." They finished the dessert, laughter bubbling back into their conversation like champagne. Each bite felt like a small victory, a reminder that love could deepen even in the face of struggle. As they stepped out into the cool evening air, the city illuminated around them, glowing like stars suspended in the night sky. Mia felt lighter, her earlier fears fading into the backdrop of the bustling world. Tom asked, throwing an arm around her shoulders in a gesture of affection. "Let's just walk," she replied, feeling buoyed by the connection they had reignited. The streets were filled with life, laughter, sounds of music drifting from nearby bars, and the unmistakable buzz of the city alive and thriving. "Mia," he said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence, "I think I get it now." "I know," she said, a soft smile spreading across her face. They walked together through the streets, arm in arm, the weight of uncertainty transformed into a shared journey. Each step felt lighter, a dance with the hope that permeated the air around them. That night was a turning point, an affirmation that struggles did not define them, and that vulnerability could lead to newfound strength. As they ventured into the night, the city felt like a canvas waiting to be painted with their story, a tale filled with laughter, growth, and the undeniable magic of love. Their path was still ahead of them, uncertain and winding, but they were now firm in their bond, ready to face the future together, hand in hand. It was a promise that with love, everything was possible, even in the face of fear. And in that moment, as they walked into the night, Mia felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. The moment Jake opened his wallet, Emily's hands started to shake. They were sitting at their usual table in the corner of the small cafe, the air thick with warmth and the rich aroma of coffee. As the sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the dust particles dancing in the air, Emily felt the familiar sensation of impending doom twist in her stomach. Jake glanced up, a carefree smile on his face. "What do you want for dessert? I think we deserve something sweet today," he said, flipping through the bills in his wallet, but Emily couldn't even process his words. Her eyes were glued to the open wallet, the cash inside representing both stability and uncertainty. In that moment, she felt exposed, as if the very act of him choosing to spend money brought forward all her insecurities. Jake's voice cut through her thoughts, and she blinked hard, forcing herself to focus. "Yeah, sorry," she replied, a hint of panic creeping into her tone. He raised an eyebrow, his expression shifting from casual to concerned. Nothing, just," she hesitated. Jake frowned, confusion clouding his features. "Spend money on dessert." The words came out before she could stop them. Emily felt her heart race, the internal judgment rising like an angry tide. Jake blinked, processing her words. "It's just dessert, Em," but the shaking in her hands intensified and she felt her pulse quicken. Was it really just dessert? For Emily, it felt like so much more. It felt like a choice. Each day had become a careful balancing act, and things had been tight lately, bills piling up, work stress escalating, all the while she felt the guilt seeping in like a slow leak. "Jake, I don't want to feel like a burden." Her voice trailed off and she turned to look out the window, unable to meet his gaze. "Don't go there," he said gently. "You're not a burden, we signed up for this together." But even as the words left his mouth, Emily felt a knot in her chest tight. "But I'm not contributing enough. You're the one carrying us financially. I feel like I'm just..." Jake leaned closer, his expression earnest. "We're not keeping score. It's not about who contributes what." "Are you sure? Because it doesn't feel that way." Emily's voice cracked, tears welling in her eyes. A silence hung in the air, thick and heavy. She could feel her hands tremble as she clenched them tightly under the table, fighting against the rush of emotions. Everyone seemed so carefree around them, laughter and chatter flowing easily as if they weren't facing some monumental crisis. "Listen," Jake said, his voice steady but soft. "Let's not make this bigger than it needs to be." "Jake, I don't want to bring you down." Her voice trailed off, the weight of her fears crashing down hard. "I wish you could see yourself through my eyes," Jake said, his gaze earnest. "You're more than the money situation." Emily looked away, biting her lip as tears threatened to spill. "It's easier to say that, I just feel." "I get it, I really do," he replied. "But you're incredible, Em. You're strong and talented. We're in this as partners. Let me help you carry this weight." She sat in silence for a moment, feeling overwhelmed by the tide of emotions swirling inside her. Jake's unwavering support poked at the walls she had built, the defenses that had been her security for so long. "It's hard for me to let go of this idea that I should be doing better," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "In this world, we face so much pressure to be perfect," he said, nodding slowly. "But perfection isn't realistic. We're all human." As she watched him, Emily felt a rush of vulnerability wash over her. The shaking in her hands started to diminish as her emotions shifted. "I keep holding myself to some unattainable standard. You don't have to handle it alone. How about we make a plan together?" Tom offered. "We can budget, set goals, and track what we need." As she listened, she felt a flicker of hope igniting within her. "I do," he assured, leaning back in his chair with a comforting smile. "And if you've got some freelance work in mind, then we can find ways to make that happen too. You can explore what makes you happy." With each passing moment, Emily felt her heart begin to soften. She realized that the way she had been seeing her worth was so one-dimensional. "You're right," she said, her voice regaining some confidence. "I haven't even considered setting goals for us. It's just..." Just then, the waitress returned with their desserts, a slice of rich chocolate cake perched on the plate, glistening under the cafe's warm lights. Tom grinned, breaking the tension. I think dessert is the perfect reward for this conversation. Emily chuckled, the levity returning as the waitress set the plate down. As they shared the cake, the moment turned into one of healing. Each bite felt like a celebration of their connection, and with it came a growing realization that they were in this together. This really is amazing, Emily said, savoring the rich chocolate. I told you. Tom's eyes sparkled with warmth as they enjoyed the tiny moment together. I appreciate you, Emily said quietly, her heart swelling with gratitude. You know I'll always be here, Jake replied, wiping a bit of chocolate off the corner of his mouth with a napkin, making her chuckle again. That's definitely part of it, she laughed, and for the first time that evening she felt a sense of light blooming within her. When they finished their dessert, they lingered at the table, the cafe bustling around them. Emily sat back, allowing herself to truly breathe for the first time that night. She asked, feeling a resurgence of hope. Tom leaned forward, eyes sparkling with ideas. Let's schedule a time this week to sit down and budget. We can outline our income, our expenses, and a little bit for fun. As they left the cafe, the air outside felt different, less heavy. The evening sky, painted in hues of pink and orange, reflected her shifting mindset. This feels good, she said, glancing up at the sky. Something shifted in the dynamic between them. Emily felt lighter, more connected to Jake. He turned to her, an unspoken understanding passing between them. He asked, and she nodded, grateful for the chance to enjoy this beautiful evening even more, their connection weaving tighter with every step. I know I still have a long way to go, but I want to commit to you, to what we can build together, Emily said earnestly. Me too, he echoed, squeezing her hand as they walked, capturing the essence of support and partnership. The path ahead was still uncertain, but they had taken the first steps toward a future filled with hope and new beginnings. As they walked, the laughter of nearby diners mingled with the evening breeze, the world alive with possibilities. And for the first time in a while, Emily felt the weight lift off her shoulders. She wasn't just Jake's partner, she was a person, a wonderful, complex person capable of change. Together, they were stepping into a brighter future, hand in hand, ready to face whatever came their way. The moment Daniel opened his wallet, a chill shot through Mia's body. They were sitting at a small, bustling coffee shop filled with the sounds of laughter, the clinking of cups, and the aroma of fresh pastries wafting through the air, yet all of that faded into a distant hum. As he pulled out a couple of crumpled bills to cover their drinks, she felt the familiar heat rising in her cheeks, her hands trembling slightly in response. Hey, what do you want? I'll grab us a treat, Daniel asked casually, glancing up at her with that easy grin that always brightened her day. But as he continued to sift through the cash in front of him, Mia's mind began to spiral. I don't know, she murmured, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. The sight of his cash felt like a spotlight illuminating all her insecurities. He suggested, but the anxiety twisted in her gut, and she barely heard him. Simply the act of him opening his wallet sent a wave of discomfort crashing over her. She could see the bills neatly organized, and it reminded her of all the times she felt inadequate, not contributing enough to their shared life. I really shouldn't, she said, her voice soft but edged with tremors. Daniel's expression shifted from excitement to concern. Mia, come on, it's just a couple of bucks for a treat. She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the table. The truth gripped her throat. It was never just a couple of bucks to her. It represented something larger, the growing anxiety about their finances, the pressure of not feeling equal in their partnership. The shaking in her hands intensified as she bit her lip, battling the torrent of emotions surging within her. His voice was softer now. He leaned in closer, searching her eyes for any spark of what was wrong. She could feel the weight of his gaze. The last thing she wanted was for him to see her struggle, to see the cracks that were forming around the edges of her facade. It's nothing really, just, he asked, cutting through her defenses like a hot knife through butter. Because if it is, we can talk about it. His sincerity cut through the fog of her anxiety, and she felt herself wavering, the walls she had built around her emotions beginning to breach. I hate that I feel like this, she admitted, feeling tears prick at her eyes. Daniel's deep brown eyes softened. He reached out to take her trembling hands in his, grounding her. You are not a burden, Mia. You mean so much more to me than any amount of money. We're in this together. The tremors in her hands subsided slightly, but the lump in her throat grew heavier. I don't want to let you down. You work so hard, and sometimes I feel like I'm just... Mia, listen, he said firmly. Everyone has moments of self-doubt. You're not supposed to have it all figured out, but even as he spoke the words, she struggled to believe them. I just feel stuck, she said, her voice cracking as she continued. It's like I'm not contributing enough to this relationship. He leaned back slightly, giving her space but keeping her hands in his. What do you want? Mia swallowed hard, the tightness in her chest growing heavier. I've been thinking about going back to school or maybe even taking up a side gig that aligns with my interests, but every time I think about it, I freeze. Daniel nodded, his expression serious. Have you talked to me about it? Her heart raced at the idea. No, I didn't want to bring it up because, what if I fail? What if I mess everything up? If you fail, then we'll figure it out, but I need you to know this: trying is always better than doing nothing, he said gently. Don't let that fear win. Mia's hands relaxed in his grip as his words started to sink in. Absolutely, you're smart, capable, and filled with ideas. He paused for a moment, a soft smile creeping across his face. She looked down, her breath catching as she felt the warmth of his hand enveloping hers. Maybe he was right, maybe this moment of vulnerability wasn't the end, but rather a beginning. I can try, she murmured, the words tasting bittersweet on her lips. Fear is part of growth, he reassured her. The key is to not let it paralyze you. As they sat there, the cafe bustling around them, Mia could feel the energy shifting. Little by little, the fear that had gripped her heart began to transform into something more positive: hope, determination, and a flicker of excitement. Okay, she said, feeling the corners of her mouth lift slightly. Let's make a plan. Exactly, and if you need any resources, we can search together. The weight of the world began to shift, and she felt herself relaxing for the first time that evening. Maybe it was worth trying to find that dream job, taking the plunge back into education, or chasing after something that brought her joy. Just then, the waitress approached with a plate of warm cookies, the smell of chocolate filling their little corner of the cafe. She announced cheerfully. Mia's eyes lit up as the plate was placed in front of them, the warm cookies fresh from the oven. She said, grinning as she broke a piece off to share. Best chocolate chip cookies in town, Daniel said with a wink, grabbing a cookie with a hint of pride. As they shared their treats, the tension within Mia began to dissolve. Each bite was a sweet reminder that in the midst of struggles, there were still moments of joy worth savoring. They laughed together, their conversation flowing with ease as they dug deeper into potential plans and dreams. Mia felt a shimmer of hope growing brighter, a newfound determination bubbling within her. You know, maybe going back to school doesn't have to be super formal or scary. Exactly, and who knows, you may end up loving it, he encouraged, his enthusiasm infectious. As they finished the cookies, the cafe began to wind down for the evening. The sound of bustling feet and clattering cups faded into a gentle hum, and the light softened. Mia rated the evening, the darkness that had lingered in her mind now illuminated by their connection and conversation. Thank you for being so understanding, she said, her voice filled with sincerity. I didn't realize how much I needed this conversation until now. I'm glad you opened up. It matters, you matter. In that moment, Mia felt invincible. They had faced the fear together, and now she stood at the threshold of possibility. Opening her heart didn't mean weakness. It meant strength, bravery, and the power of vulnerability. As they left the cafe hand in hand, the evening air enveloped them in a comforting embrace. The stars glittered above like infinite possibilities, and Mia knew the path ahead wouldn't always be easy, but it felt manageable now. With every step, they forged a bond that transcended the worries and fears that had once consumed her. They were partners in every sense, poised to navigate the complexities of life, love, and dreams together. It's the start of something new, Daniel said, squeezing her hand as they walked into the night. Yes, it is, Mia replied with a smile, her heart brimming with hope. Together, they stepped into a world filled with endless opportunities, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. And in that moment, she understood the true meaning of partnership, that it was about supporting one another through the highs and lows, coming together to create a shared future marked by love, determination, and the joy of chasing dreams. The moment Ethan opened his wallet, Isla's hands started to shake. They were sitting at a quaint cafe in the heart of the city, the sun filtering through the window and casting gentle shadows on the table. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the sweet scent of pastries, but all of that faded into the background. Her gaze was fixated on the contents of his wallet, crumpled bills, an old receipt, and a faded picture of them from a happier day. Isla swallowed hard, feeling a knot form in her throat. She managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan looked up, his brow furrowed. He asked, his tone still casual, almost carefree, as if he hadn't noticed the tension rising between them. Spend money like this, she replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The truth hung in the air, thick and challenging. Isla wasn't just worried about the dessert menu. She was grappling with less tangible but equally heavy financial fears. Ethan, oblivious to her internal storm, continued to sift through the cash in his wallet. Come on, it's just dessert. We've had a tough week. As he turned to look at the dessert display, Isla felt the heat rising in her cheeks. His nonchalance struck her like a bolt of lightning. It was a gentle reminder of the widening chasm between them. Each crumpled bill he handled felt like a judgment, a confrontation with everything she hadn't achieved. It's not just about dessert, she snapped, the frustration spilling out before she could reel it back in. Startled, Ethan lowered his hand and focused entirely on her. The carefree atmosphere around them slipped away, replaced by a rising tide of tension. He asked, brow furrowing deeper. She took a deep breath, attempting to regain her composure. The trembling in her hands had become more pronounced, and she nervously tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Sometimes I feel like I'm letting you down, like you're doing so much and I'm just... Ethan's expression softened. You're not letting me down. We're a team, remember. We share everything, the good, the bad. He smiled gently, but it did little to ease the storm brewing within Isla. Ethan, it's hard to explain, she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. Lately I've been second-guessing everything, my job, my choices, even us. Ethan's tone darkened, a hint of confusion mixing with concern. Isla said, feeling the tears prick at the corners of her eyes, I want to be enough for you. Ethan's brow furrowed deeper and he leaned further across the table. You're not a burden, Isla. Stop thinking that way. You're amazing. I don't think of our relationship in terms of who brings what money-wise. Underneath the table, Isla's hands clenched into fists. The vulnerability, the raw honesty, began to crack the walls she had built around herself. But I don't feel like a partner. The cafe felt charged with their tension. Conversations around them faded into a dull murmur. Isla felt like the walls were closing in, her heart pounding as she spoke. You work so hard and I sit here questioning everything. I see my friends succeeding and I just can't help but think. Ethan reached across the table, squeezing her hands, holding her steady even as she felt herself spiraling. Mornings are tough and life is hard, but you're doing your best in everything. But I can't shake this feeling of inadequacy, she confessed, her voice trembling. I want to be better for you. Isla's hands shook more violently now, a wave of anxiety surging through her. She stared down at their intertwined fingers, searching for strength, searching for reassurance. Listen, I don't want you to compare yourself to anyone else. You're on your own journey. Just because it looks different doesn't mean it's any less valuable, he said softly. Tears brimmed in her eyes and she swallowed hard, feeling her emotions crash like waves against the shore. It's just never, he said, his voice firm. We're in this together. You do not hold me back. Isla's heart still raced as she struggled to reconcile her emotions. What he said made sense, yet doubt lingered like a shadow. I think it's normal to feel overwhelmed, Ethan replied. Life can be chaotic and we're still figuring things out. She looked into his eyes, searching for the comfort she needed, but uncertainty loomed in the air. She whispered, vulnerability swallowing her voice. Then you fall and I'll be there to help you get back up. We'll learn from it together. As he spoke, an inkling of hope sparked within Isla. The way he held her hands felt like an anchor in a stormy sea, reminding her that even in turbulent times there was steadiness to be found. Ethan asked, trying to infuse some lightness into the moment, because I really think we deserve it. A couple of cookies won't set us back. A faint smile curled at the corners of her mouth at his playful spirit, a sign that he was trying to lighten the mood. All right, let's do it, she said softly. Never. Promised with a playful smirk. As he signaled the waitress for dessert, Isla felt a resurfacing of hope blossoming in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, things could get better. But just as the waitress returned with their treats, Ethan's phone buzzed on the table, the screen lighting up with a notification. His expression shifted, a shadow crossing his face as he glanced at the screen. The light banter of the cafe faded once again as he focused intently on his phone. Isla asked, a knot tightening in her stomach. It's my boss, she just texted saying I need to come into the office for an urgent meeting. The words hit Isla like a ton of bricks. In an instant, the warmth and excitement melted away, replaced by icy disappointment. I'm sorry, he said, looking torn. I thought tonight would be free. She wouldn't say it's urgent if it wasn't. Isla's heart sank as the reality of the situation settled in. The moment they'd been trying to create, the moment of connection and understanding, was being taken away by a work obligation. I don't have a choice, he replied, genuine regret washing over his features. The cafe felt colder somehow, the laughter of nearby patrons now echoing hollowly. Guess I'll be alone then, she said, forcing a laugh but failing to hold back the tremor in her voice. You're not alone, he insisted, looking at her like he was trying to bridge the widening gap. We'll talk, I promise. Sure, she replied quietly, though she could feel her heartache creeping back. Beneath the surface, anxiety bubbled once again. Mia, he said, his voice gentle but firm, we'll face this, okay? Her gaze dropped to the untouched plate of cookies, once a symbol of celebration, now a reminder of how quickly the mood could shift. All right, she said, forcing a smile even as her heart felt heavy. As he stood, she felt that familiar knot in her throat return, tightening more than ever. He leaned down, pressing a quick kiss to her forehead. It was meant to be comforting, but the moment felt bittersweet. I'll text you as soon as I'm done, he promised before turning to leave. Isla watched him walk away, the door swinging closed behind him. The laughter and chatter around her resumed, but she sat there, feeling lost again. The weight of her worries pressed down, and as she picked up one of the cookies, her hands trembled anew. What was she going to do without him? The lingering taste of fear mingled with the sweetness of the cookie. She didn't want this to define her relationship, but the doubts started creeping back, whispering the same old lies. Maybe she really was a burden. Maybe he'd realized that soon enough. Alone in the cafe, she took a deep breath, trying to ground herself. She reached for her phone, scrolling through social media as a form of distraction, but what she found only heightened the ache in her heart. Posts of friends achieving milestones, traveling, and thriving filled her feed, each one a reminder of everything she felt she was lacking. Mia's hands shook as she set down her phone. Was this how it would always be? Achievements overshadowed by anxiety. She took another cookie, a single bite, and the sweetness only served as a fleeting comfort. Digging her nails into her palm, she felt tears welling in her eyes. Suddenly, her phone vibrated again. Her heart raced as she hoped it would be Ethan, but the screen illuminated a number she didn't recognize. Hesitating for just a moment, she swiped to answer. A stern voice inquired. She responded, the unease growing in her stomach. "This is Becker and Associates." The words hit her like a thunderclap. An interview, her voice trembled with shock. Her heart raced as hopes flickered to life. Could this be the opportunity she needed? Yes, of course. As the weight of the world darkened the cafe around her, excitement began to pulse through her veins. The pressure might be building, but perhaps there was still hope to be found within the uncertainty. Just as she started to envision a new beginning, the door swung open, letting in the cool evening air. And in walked Ethan, his expression carrying an unexpected weight. Their eyes locked, and the world seemed to freeze for a moment. He exclaimed, but before he could finish, the conversation blared through the phone, pulling her back. "Yes, I'm very interested in the role. I'd love to discuss it further," she said, maintaining focus on the call. Ethan advanced toward her, urgency in his steps, but she couldn't break away. The fear and uncertainty that had plagued her were colliding with a new opportunity, and she could feel the adrenaline surging. He called again, but she held up her hand, fighting between his presence and the excitement of the moment. Something significant was happening, and she could feel the heat of the unfolding narrative enveloping her. And even as emotions collided, she knew this was a turning point, teetering on the edge of profound change. With the weight of doubt and fear pushing from one side and the thrill of possibility from the other, her heart pounded loudly in her chest, and she stood at the precipice of two futures, one defined by her insecurities and the other ripe with potential. She asked the voice on the line, her eyes never leaving Ethan. The view before her rippled with tension, every heartbeat echoing the uncertainty of their relationship, their dreams, and the life they wanted to build together. In that moment, a choice lay before her, and she was ready to seize it. Because sometimes, when everything feels like it's falling apart, a new beginning can emerge from the rubble. But what would that new beginning look like? As she clutched the phone tightly in one hand and saw Ethan's sincere eyes pleading for connection in the other, she took a deep breath, prepared to chart a brand new course, filled with hope and unexpected challenges. And then, just as she readied herself to speak, everything changed.